So we are in the northern part of Calistoga here. The mountain that is directly in front of us, that's a little bit lighter shade of gray, that's Mount St. Helena. So that actually used to be an active volcano. It erupted about 2.5 million years ago. And the back of mountain range here to the right is all volcanic rock. So the reason why we have such amazing soil here is from actually the mountain range right here to our left, Mount St. Helena. So used to being an active volcano, it actually deposited a bunch of volcanic matter within this valley basin floor. We're in an alluvial fan. So the mountain range to our left is oceanic rock, that's Spring Mountain, and everything is running downhill down to the Napa Valley River. So in the very back portion of the property here. So we're on a 40-acre block, and we are a family-owned winery. There's only about 10% of the wineries in Napa Valley that are still family-owned. So it's something a little extra special that we're trying to maintain. So from this location, everything that is running from this mountain range to the left runs down our 40-acre block down to the Napa Valley River. So it brings all that beautiful minerality from the ocean side of Spring Mountain down to the volcanic side of our property. So if you look kind of in the center of our property here, we actually have a big water reserve, which you can kind of see if you get up on your tippy toes, and it's actually still full, which is really odd for us in California. We usually are in a drought, so the fact that we have water and basically have had a ton of rain this year is very unusual. This is like the most rain we've had since the late 1800s, so it's been kind of an odd year for us. A bud break for us, which is actually the beginning of springtime, kind of starting off when the actual grapes begin to develop. Bud break happened kind of at the end of April, beginning of May. And at the beginning of the season, we won't get that fruit at the end of our harvest. So something to keep in mind. People will ask us, how does rain affect this particular climate? How does it affect the grapes in the long run? In this case, it's a really bad timing situation for us to get it at the beginning of harvest, all throughout summer, or at the end of the harvest especially. So, you know, we kind of tease Californians. We all want our rain, but we only want it when we want it. Can't be between this month and this month. So basically what we're looking at here is all the Merlot. Give you a little history of our location. This used to be a Duckhorn property. So Dan Duckhorn basically sold this property to Chris back in 1994. But prior to that, we were managing these grapes with our vineyard management company. So Chris's family, Chris Madrigal is our owner and proprietor. That's where the name comes from. And Chris's grandparents arrived here in 1938. So in 1933, we were finishing up with Prohibition. So they were living in the back portion of the Silverado Trail, kind of where the solar panels are at there. On that property, there's a little one-bedroom cottage, and they raised 12 kids there. And out of the 12, Jess, Chris's dad, went into the 101st Airborne. So he was actually living in Omaha, Nebraska for about 20 years. And then when he retired, he came back out here to Calistoga and opened up a vineyard management company. So the vineyard management company is on the left-hand side of the water reserve. That was opened in 1974. Really just started with Chris and his dad, a couple trucks, a couple pairs of pruning shears. They went out and made a name for themselves with their farming practices. And now we manage over 800 acres in Napa Valley and in Mendocino. So on the opposite side of the property, kind of in the very back, you can see a little white roof. That's Jess Madrigal's home, so that's Chris's dad, so he still lives on site. So the next pour I have for you guys, we need some more wine. All right. Yes, yes, yes. Anything that looks adjacent to a vase is a dump bucket. Here you go, dear. And if we're down by the dirt, you know, wine isn't necessarily good for plants. Please don't dump it directly on the plants or in our potted plants, but you can dump it on the ground. It's not a big deal. So 2013 Zin for you guys.
Wow.
This is Jess's favorite varietal. This is a year where we had strong drought going on. Last time get to be first this time. Yes, when you went around by the tasting room, it's immediately to the right. Sure, we'll be out here. It's 2013 Zin.
Zinfandel is super dry, right?
It's a little bit more tannic, yeah.
Okay.
So let's talk about tasting. Has anybody done a sensory tasting before? All right. Sensory tasting is when you're actually kind of analyzing what you are getting off the stimulus of the wine, what you're smelling, what you're seeing, what you're tasting. A lot of times they'll have other items within the area for you to pair that with. So they might have, this is Zin. They might have, yeah, Zinfandel. They might have sage, or they might have like strawberries out. And if you actually smell that item and then you smell the wine, it's kind of a compare and contrast.
I see.
Everybody get a pours in? Okay, so Zinfandel is considered to be more of a medium-bodied wine. I think the way that I try to break it down, and everybody has a different way of explaining this, but the easiest way I can explain for reds is, if you're thinking high acid in wine, it usually makes you salivate a little bit. So if you put like a sour candy in your mouth, it makes you salivate, like a gummy bear or one of those sour gummy candies. Usually that's a more high acid wine. So in reds, that might be like your Pinots, your Grenache, lighter style. So then you have tannic wines. Now what's the tannins? Anybody know? Tannins are what are actually coming off the skin of the grape. So that's what gives it the beautiful color. That's what actually gives it the dryness on your actual palate. For whites, that's considered basically more of a drying or wicking system on the actual palate. For reds, it's a little bit more predominant. So for reds, it literally will become what we call grippy, which is basically the moisture in your mouth is completely taken away. So our Petite Syrah is going to be the best example of a grippy wine. So this Zinfandel to me is kind of a medium body, meaning a good balance of acid, good balance of tannin. Basically, I love Zin because to me it represents the most pure flavor of grapes. This tastes like raisins to me, which is kind of a direct relation of what we think of with grapes when we dry them out. So you get a little bit of pepper, you get some really strong concentration of more cooked fruit if you get mountain Zinfandel grapes. So for our mountain range, directly behind you guys, kind of going up and over the mountain range to the right, we see that little patch of trees. That is Howell Mountain. And then if you keep going south a little ways, you have Atlas Peak. So we used to source Atlas Peak fruit and Howell Mountain fruit. The years that we got for Atlas Peak, we actually were producing all the way up until 2017, and we lost that fruit in the fires we had. And then Howell Mountain, we only got for the year of 2013. So in our next pour, in our Cabernet, you're actually going to be able to try some mountain fruit. Now, if you get Zinfandels from the mountain, it produces more of a concentration. So what I notice typically is more pepper, more brambly flavor, so almost like cooked fruit. When you get Valley Floor, brambly, it's cooked berries. Are you Californian or what? Split again on each side. It's called a quad cordon. You'll notice that this could probably take on more weight. So these are pretty thick, right? This hardwood here is actually really developed and nice and strong. So this could take a lot of weight. The other thing you're going to notice is we got some of these vines that are just out of control and taking off. So grapevines grow really fast, about 3 centimeters per day. So, I mean, 3 inches per day. Wow, 3 centimeters is not that big. 3 inches per day. So if you happen to be gone for about a week, you could come back and just have a ton of growth. So in this case, what we want to do is take this off. So they're coming through actually next week, and they did it previous week, came through and pruned back some of these what we call suckers. And that means that it's an extra part of the vine that's literally just taking an abundance of energy from the vine itself. So we're going to prune these back, typically all the way back down to the hardwood here. The other thing you're going to notice now, where we're positioned, this is west, and the opposite side of this vine is east. So we actually want to provide more of a canopy on the west side. Being Merlot is a thinner skinned red grape, it actually can raisin up pretty easily. So we actually want to provide a little bit of shade for this particular varietal. On the opposite side of the vine, we typically open it up a little bit more. So when they do come through to prune, they're going to be opening that up so it gets more sun exposure in the morning when it's actually not as warm or as intense out here. Now, the other thing I'll point out, we've got baby grapes. So if you look at these, they're not fully developed. They're probably going to get about double this in size. And we have just now finished basically the end of summer solstice on the 21st. So we're at a point in the year where everything is starting to shift into the progression of fall, basically. So we're going to hit the next phase for the grapes, which is called veration. It's the onset of ripening for the grapes. So that usually starts, depending on how warm it is, beginning of August, second week of August. And then everything will start to ripen up, and we'll keep these on the vine till the end of October, typically, middle of October. This last year we had fires, so we actually had to keep the grapes on the vine a little bit longer. Last day of harvesting was on Halloween, and we picked our Cabernet. So the Merlot last year was picked at the beginning of October. So sometimes people will come out and ask, why is it that you have grapes? They're not red yet. This is a red varietal. Well, they first develop in size and structure, and then they go through the ripening process. We also do all of our pruning and picking by hand. So the analogy I like to use for that is if anybody has kids and you give your kid a piece of fruit for lunch and they bring it back at the end of the week and it's all beat up from their lunchbox, you may not necessarily want to make an apple pie out of that apple, right? It's going to be bruised. It's the same thing with grapes, but if you beat up grapes, they tend to bring out an astringency from the skin. So we do all our own hand picking, number one, so we can pick the best caliber fruit. Pickers are paid for the amount of weight they actually bring in, how fast they pick, and making sure that the clusters they pick are the best caliber. So you see how this particular little part of the vine only has like 2 little grapes, and there's some clusters that will have like 3 or 4. You wouldn't want to pick that. You want something that's nice and selective as far as the actual size and structure of the vine itself or the stem itself. We don't want to pick the small leftover little clusters that are basically not getting as much energy as the rest of the fruit production.
Kristen?
Yep.
To that point, so what they do throughout the year is not only are they pruning back the leaves and controlling the canopy, they're also cutting off the unwanted clusters so they can focus the energy on the clusters they want to keep, so that when it comes harvest, it's a little easier to get the quality clusters out of there. And it's done at night. Nighttime harvesting is now the way to go. It's cooler at night and the sugar levels on the grapes have stabilized, so they're good for picking, and it's cooler for the worker. So instead of in the hot sun, we're doing it at night with headlamps.
I was going to ask, where's the lighting?
Yeah, they all
we
have
have big lights we put out
yeah,
here, like for
depends on
construction.
Depends on the winery and what the resources are.
Okay.
There's a lot of headlamps.
Okay.
So the guys that are working this property have actually been managers because, like I mentioned, we manage other property, about 800 other acres. So the guys that are actually working this property have to be managing other crews for at least 10 years before they actually get to work this property. So we take the most efficient workers. The pruning back of all the suckers they do during the day, and then like I mentioned earlier for harvest, we actually usually start about 2 a.m. So for each individual block, we go block by block because not everything is ready at the same time. So we have Sauvignon Blanc grapes in the very back of the property. That's our only white being grown here. And then we typically move on to like the Cab Francs, the Grenache, the Tempranillo, just depending on the sugar level, how Chris is feeling about the acid level in the grapes, and what kind of production he's actually looking to get out of everything. He'll kind of make a determination of what needs to go first. But in general, when we do each individual block, how many people do you think we actually bring out to do this work? So you got one night, you're working for a few hours. Let's say that a block is half of these grapes behind you guys going all the way to the front of the property.
Couple.
Throw out a number.
You said 100.
100? Ooh, God, Lord, no. We only have 45 employees in general for our entire staffing company over there. Usually it's about 5 to 10 people, max.
Wow.
So very small
they're
crew.
fine.
So they're
really
fast. They
skilled.
come through and just... We have a little hook to knife, so it actually pulls the fruit very easily right off the vine. So this is all the Merlot. Now this is an older style trellising. You don't typically see this particular style anymore with the wooden stays. This is more pre the 80s. And we're gonna go take a look at every sprouts. Got a bunch of seeds. Did a ton of tomatoes in his greenhouse throughout the winter. And then he had a lot more success than what he thought. So I have 17 tomatoes at home that came from Chris. And then about 4 or 5 of my own that I picked up. So yeah, we got 22 out here. Little black ones. These ones right here behind Sherman are called blueberries. And they all taste relatively like a tomato. Some of the black, really dark ones are a little bit more smoky. But yeah, there might be a couple on there that are ripe. So feel free if we walk back. We'll make Sherman the guinea pig here.
It's one of those when you can't find
We had some orange ones that were ripe, but I think we munched them down.
This reminds me of, as a segue into olive trees are very abundant in Napa Valley.
Oh Lord, yeah.
Don't
Eat
eat
them.
those.
Don't eat them.
Not even close.
They're not cured.
They're not cured, and especially not this time of year. They're not even ripe. But even when they're ripe, yeah, don't eat them. There's talk about astringency and bitterness. It'll just completely take away all the moisture in your palate. So I have a Cabernet for you guys next. 2013 Napa Valley Cab. So this is the only year that we got Howell Mountain fruit. The only contract we had for Howell Mountain, which Howell Mountain has beautiful concentration. you know, Hell Mountain and Atlas Peak are both really known for Cabernet. So if you come here quite often, or if you get a chance to actually try those individual areas, you basically can really find out which one you prefer compared to the valley floor.